Carrie always loved Sundays. Her parents would go out to run errands, leaving her to call her boyfriend. Her parents didn't know about him. As an only child, her parents were overprotective and prohibited her from dating until she was 15. She, of course, decided to keep Josh's existence hidden from them. This didn't matter. She loved him. She loved talking to him. His voice sent her heart aflutter. Sunday was the only time she could call him and not have to be worried about being caught. It became a ritual for them. Every Sunday, she would call and they would talk until her parents got home. There was one blemish in this otherwise perfect scene. Josh's brother was nosy and would always pick up the phone and listen in on their conversation. Carrie could hear his breathing when they talked. He tried to breathe softly, but she could still hear him. This went on for weeks, and slowly Carrie's frustration at the situation grew. Josh ignored it, but after one particularly heated conversation, Carrie said, "Could you tell your brother to buzz off? I can hear him listening in on the other phone line." Josh's answer was sobering. "We don't have another phone in the house. I thought you said you were certain your parents had gone out to run errands." Listened to the phone click onto the receiver in her kitchen. She had watched her parents leave. Whoever was in her kitchen was not her parents. If you like this video and you want to hear more, please like and subscribe so you can get updated on new videos and weekly streams. Also, follow me in my social media link below and leave a comment on this video as I love interacting with you all. They say generosity makes you a happier person. I don't know if that's true, but regardless, I have links below if you want to leave me a tip. There's more to come, so join me for the journey. And, as always, good night.
I saw the light outside my window. Maybe I'm crazy, but I saw a light outside, I swear. I live in a small town with a small amount of crime. Okay, listen, I saw eyes. Don't laugh. I saw bright blue eyes staring at me. It started from afar, but then each night the eyes grew closer. It was not just eyes that shocked me, it was the appearance of the person. They were just like the night sky. They were so mysterious. They jumped around like a cat, but their dress sense was a clown. Then again, they looked human. I also remember them having small lips. They were scary. The eyes were just scary. Living in a house and you sleep upstairs, but all of a sudden you see a flash of light. So you peer out to see a pair of bright blue eyes staring at you. Maybe I'm dreaming, but the features seem so real. The eyes seem real. How can I tell the difference between reality and a fantasy? Is there any way of telling? How do you know that I'm real? How do you know if you are real? How do you know if the world around you is real? Everything might seem real around you, but is it really real? Or are you always living in a fantasy? But I know for sure what I saw and the features I saw were all real. I can't prove that, but in my heart, I know what I saw was certainly not a fantasy.
The farm had been in the family for generations. My thrice grandfather, Eric Peterson, had claimed land in the Canadian wilderness, and he set out to make a life for his family from the land. One little quirk that he had brought over from the old country was that every 6 months, on the winter or summer solstice, he would leave out an offering. Generally, it was in the form of a cow or a goat. He would set it loose in the field at night on the solstice. In the morning, the animal was gone, and there was never any trace that it had been there in the first place. He always expressed the importance of doing this. So, everyone that has owned the farm over the years has kept up the practice. When I was 10, the farm was falling on hard times. A harsh winter followed by a dry summer made growing crops extremely difficult. My father made the decision not to put out the summer sacrifice. At first, nothing seemed different. My brother and I would continue with our chores without any change. About a week later, I was checking on our horses when I first noticed the deep scratches on the wall of the stable. I quickly unlatched the door, and a sick scene greeted me. Stormcloud, my favourite horse, lay on the ground, with several deep cuts in her side. She was still breathing, so I ran into the stable and tried to put pressure on the wounds, while I yelled for Steve to get Dad. Dad ran in his well-worn yet reliable 30-30 lever-action rifle. The local vet arrived within the hour, and we were able to get Storm onto the horse trailer and over to the vet's where he stitched up her side. However, he felt like she needed to stay with him to make sure none of the scratches got infected. It wasn't until we were almost back home that I remember that I didn't see Sand King, our other horse, anywhere. Dad turned pale when I told him this. As soon as we got home, he made me go inside and tell Mum to lock all the doors and the windows, and not to open them until he came back inside. I did as I was told, and when Dad came back later that night, I asked him if he found Sand King. Dad told us that whatever attacked Stormcloud must have caused Sand to run away. As it was getting on 10 PM, Dad told me to get to bed. With a deep sadness in my chest, I walked up the stairs and walked to the end of the hall where my room is, and opened the door. Seeing as we don't have air conditioning, my room got stuffy with the window closed and locked. I was about to open the window when I heard my dad yell up to make sure I kept the window locked. I crawled into bed and slowly drifted off to sleep. I was running through the woods, calling out to Sand King, trying to find him. I heard a loud baying and snorting to the left off in the distance. I turned and ran, almost slipping on the edge of a small ravine. I stopped for a moment to catch my breath and allow my heart to slow down a little. I leaned up against a gnarled tree trunk and heard an unearthly rumble, as if the earth itself was growling at me. With my heart thrumming through my entire body, I stepped closer to the ravine. There, at the bottom, was Sand King. Or rather, what was left of him. I promptly threw up. His back half was shredded, as if somebody tried amputating his legs with a chainsaw while they were drunk. His front half was fine, up until his head. It looked like there was nothing there, save for his skin. It looked as if his skull was removed, yet his skin stayed intact. A bright flash illuminated the sky. The loudest clap of thunder that I'd ever heard rattled me almost out of the frame. I heard a loud shatter outside of my room. I jumped up to check what it was, and as I opened the door, I heard my father running up the stairs. He asked me if something in my room broke, and I told him that it wasn't in my room. He quickly walked past me and opened the door to my brother's room. The first thing we noticed was his bedside lamp laying in a pile of shattered pottery at the foot of the nightstand. My father ran inside the room and slammed his window shut, figuring that the wind must have just knocked down the lamp. Dad walked over and rubbed my brother's forehead. He walked out and shut the door. He told me to get to bed and went downstairs again. I turned back into my room and crawled back into bed. I fell asleep with the feeling that something wasn't quite right. In the morning, I was getting ready to head out for my chores, but my dad told me to wait for my brother and to take the gun with me. I sat down and waited for several minutes, but he didn't come down. I got tired of waiting, so I went upstairs to get him. I didn't hear anything from inside his room, so I opened up his door. I could just make out him lying there in the bed, but as it was only 5 in the morning, there wasn't much light. I reached over and flipped the light switch. My lungs got caught in my throat. Laying there, on the bed, in a large pool of blood, lay what was left of my brother. His right leg was missing, and his left was split open, with much of the calf muscle missing. His femur was cracked in two lengthwise, and it looked as if the marrow had been sucked out. His chest was torn open, and his heart was bitten in half, and his intestines were resting on the bed like a massive plate of pasta. I looked down towards his head and saw his peaceful smile, as if he was still dreaming. I yelled for Dad and then promptly passed out on the floor. The funeral was held a few days later. The local police launched an investigation, but no leads were found. Even after the death of my brother, nothing else happened that was out of the ordinary. The air cooled and the seasons once again began their shifting. As the winter solstice approached, my father sent me and my mother, whom at the time was still appearing to be under the impression that my brother's death was her fault, off to visit my grandparents. We planned on staying until the end of the winter holidays. This year's harvest had been pretty successful, so my father had put out an older bull who had passed the age of being good for breeding out. He then came over to join my mother and I. When we returned, it was the same as when we left. After that summer, my father never went another solstice without putting out an offering. Years passed, and I went off and joined the military, ending up taking part of Operation Medak Pocket. After my service, I met up with Charlotte, who would become my wife 3 years later. My first child, a boy by the name of Ryan, was born in early June. My father died of a heart attack soon after, and my mother was paralysed from a stroke less than a week after his funeral. Since I was the last living child, it was up to me to return to the farm and keep it in the family. A week after the stroke, once my mother was placed in a long-term care facility, Charlotte and I moved in. The move coincided with the summer solstice, and by sheer chance, I forgot about the offering and didn't place one out. I didn't even remember until 2 days after the solstice, when I went to feed the chickens and found eerily similar claw marks. The realization that I'd forgot the offering struck me as if Thor himself swung the mighty Mjolnir into my chest. I quickly ran inside and stormed into the master bedroom, where Charlotte was feeding Ryan. I grabbed a suitcase and filled it with clothing. Charlotte asked what the problem was, but I was too frightened to explain properly. The only words I was able to spit out were brother and solstice. I saw the blood drain from her face, as she understood exactly what had happened, and why I was acting delirious. We ran to the truck, and I told Charlotte to get to her parents' house as quickly as possible. I decided that this time would be the last time that the creature bothered the farm ever again. I grabbed the old rifle, still in great shape thanks to my father's excellent and meticulous cleaning done every week. I strapped to my hip a knife, which had been made by Eric and had been passed down to each son that had stayed with the farm. Lastly, I grabbed my cigars and a bottle of scotch that had been in the pantry, and went outside to sit on the back patio. I sat down and lit a cigar, took a swig of the scotch, then stared up at the stars, wondering if I would ever see Charlotte or Ryan again. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point, I must have fallen asleep. One of the deepest rumbles I'd ever heard shattered my dream worlds and sucked me back into reality. With just the moon and starlight, I couldn't see very well what had awoken me, but you didn't need to see it to know it was there. Its presence would be enough to instill a true sense of fear deep into your very being. The kind of fear where you can't even remember how to breathe, let alone run or fight. It's the very fear a mouse feels when a snake is about to strike. This was a predator, and I was its prey. Going through my mind for those brief few moments of the standstill amidst the growling creature was the thought of, I'm gonna die. Again and again, it repeated itself through my mind. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm going to die. I felt it step closer, and I thought about what I would miss most in my life. That's when my mind brought forth the image of Charlotte and Ryan, stuck here by themselves with this creature lurking in wait at the shadows. The thought of my son growing up without a father overpowered the fear, and I grabbed the half-full bottle and twisted around, throwing it at where I believed the creature to be. I heard the bottle shatter, and a shriek of pain followed closely behind. I twisted back around and grabbed the rifle, and then ran a good distance away. When I turned around, all I could see was a figure that looked vaguely like a man, wearing a thick fur coat, except that is, the long claws glinting in the moonlight at the end of each finger. Its hands were covering its face, primarily where its nose should be, which seemed kinda smart considering the half bottle of strong scotch was just thrown on it. When it lowered its hands, I could just make out a long snout, more like a dog or bear's face instead of a human's. It caught sight of me, started charging towards me, and I started unloading shell after shell into it. When the gun ran out of ammo, instead of taking the time to reload, I dropped the rifle and drew the knife. Taking 6 30-30 shells knocked the creature back, and it was struggling to stay standing. With adrenaline pumping through my body, I charged at the creature, dodging its swinging claws, and sunk the 5-inch knife blade deep into the creature's heart. I tumbled back and pulled the blade free. By the time its body hit the dirt, the creature was no more. I stepped back and felt the euphoria of having escaped death, and I hate to admit it, but I was giggling with happiness. After finally avenging my brother, I walked over to the house and turned on the yard lights so I could get a good look at exactly what this creature was. As I walked over, I grabbed out my good Cuban cigar and lit it, inhaling the tangy taste of true victory. I grabbed the rifle and reloaded it, and when I got back to the creature, I put all 6 rounds right into its forehead. After that, I checked out to see what it was, and to this day, I still don't know. It was about 7 feet tall and covered with a thick brown fur. The claws on its hands and feet were each about 2 inches long, and its face did indeed look like it should have been on a bear instead of a human. I still smelled the stench of booze, and it gave me an idea. I reached round and found a small twig. I grabbed out my lighter and I lit the twig on fire and dropped it on the beast. As its body flared up, I turned back to the house to call Charlotte and tell her that it had finally come to an end.
The Truth About the Gargoyle Man by Lucky Number. Stay away from the Gargoyle Man, Katie's father had always warned. The swamp surrounding their property dripped with legends, but the chief among them was the Gargoyle Man. As is typically, there were varying descriptions of who or what the monster was. But no matter who you talked to in Paquete County, they all agreed on one fact. The Gargoyle Man was real. Katie loved wandering the marshy forests, catching frogs and king snakes, and the occasional Paquete demon. That was the local name for a sort of scorpion that lived there. One muggy evening, with July heat sticking to her skin, Katie happened upon something new. A tiny, rotted-out shanty resting hesitantly among the cypress trees, almost hovering in the dark swamp water. The abandoned hut was barely fit to be a muskrat's home. Maneuvering as naturally as an amphibian, Katie made her way over to the mossy hovel. As she neared a miniature doorway, something poked its head out.
Hello?
Its shaky voice tested the moist air. Katie responded confidently without concern. She knew this swamp well and had nothing to fear. Are you him? The Gargoyle Man? A shuffling mess of bedraggled skin and rags hobbled from the doorway and into the marsh.
I don't like that name. It isn't very nice.
Katie felt sorry for the poor thing. Well, golly, I'm sorry. It's just what they call you. Why do you live out here? She inquired innocently.
It's what must be. I've no choice in it.
answered the pitiful creature. Katie loved all God's creatures, and the Gargoyle Man was deserving of friendship, just like any of them. The pair became inseparable, romping all through the wetlands. Katie never told her dad where she was off to, and he never took issue with it. She was always home in time for bedtime. He trusted his daughter. He just hoped that she never met the Gargoyle Man. He knew it would spell doom if she did. As the air cooled, Katie spent less time in the swampland, but she still found her precious visits with her new friend most rewarding. She felt honored, being kind to the one who was rejected by the world. She knew all too well what it was like. So with generosity in her heart, Katie gathered up a batch of cookies to take to her friend in the bog. When she arrived, the one they called the Gargoyle Man was waiting among the lily pads. "Hello," Katie called out. "I've brought you something sweet." The creature thanked her and invited her into his home. "You know, my father told me not to encounter you," Katie explained, stooping low as she entered the shack.
I know. He has reasons to keep you from me. I know something you don't. Would you like to know why you're to shun me?
She nodded. With a serpentine smile, the Gargoyle Man stepped in front of the doorway, blocking Katie's exit.
Silly girl. He just wanted to protect you from monsters. I can't help what I am.
So quoth this raven.
What are dreams? What are they truly? Are they nothing more than bits and pieces of thoughts and ideas thrown together without design or purpose? Might they serve a greater purpose, such as whisper tales of coming days or reveal forgotten, lost recollections from days long past? Maybe your soul is expelled from our bodies each night, thrust out into the void, and travels to lands far away. Consider this. What if our dreams are more than just nonsense? What if they were premonitions and told of adventures not yet had? Tell me, have you ever had a dream that revealed wonders so great it made your waking life seem distant and dull? Have you ever dreamed a dream that revealed glimpses of who you are and whispered secrets of what you were meant to become? Do you know anything that could fill you with such sorrow to awaken each morning and desire with all your might that your eyes would open to a brand new world? Yet never does it come. With every sunrise, that is the burden I bear. However, such sadness does not consume me, for you see, in my heart, I know my dreams are much more than wishful thinking and a longing desire for something more to this life. They are so much more than you could possibly imagine. For you see, my dreams are preparing me for something great to come. I know that to be the truth. No, it does not offend me when you roll your eyes at me. You are not the first to dismiss my words or mock my resolve. Many simply laugh out of amusement, and others feign looks of pity towards me. They say, surely only one who is mad would entertain such foolishness. They can only see a land of make-believe, a fairy tale fabricated from the mind of a small boy. They cannot accept that a child, orphaned as an infant, who never knew the embrace of a mother, or the guidance from a father could still possess a birthright of greatness, nor would they consider such a waif could excel above all others with only the determination of his heart and by the strength in his hands. Despite it all, I hold no malice toward anyone, for their conclusions are not without logic, albeit sadly short-sighted. Well, soon, all will be revealed. For tomorrow is my birthday, and when I am gone, they will know they were wrong. You see, tomorrow is the day my dreams have been telling me about for as long as I can remember. It is a day my dreams foretold before the sun sets on your 5 and 10th year of life. You will return with hope and salvation on your back and light in your hands. By your blade, you will rid the land of the worm. That is what I see each and every night when I close my eyes and surrender to sleep. So, for one brief moment, let go of all your misgivings and apprehensions. Leave behind your doubt and listen to my voice. Listen and let me tell you about my dreams. In my dreams, there's a realm so close to our own that only the width of a hair separates the two. They exist side by side, unaware of one another. Yet they are so far apart that traveling the distance would take 1,000 years. It is a medieval realm where science and magic live alongside each other as beloved friends. Machines and technology, sorcery and magic, here they are one. In this world, little distinction can be seen between matters of wizarding and science. Sorcerers and teachers, or magician and healers, they are the same here. This realm is ruled by 6 great nations, each with a king and queen of virtuous heart and noble blood. Castles and villages, farms and towns pepper the land. All live simplistic lives with a hint of technologies, both natural and mystical. In my dreams, I see a beautiful white domed temple made of ivory stone. The temple is home to 6 revered weapons made from sacred steel, a gift from a goddess bestowed upon a chosen warrior from each nation. She offered these weapons in preparation for the day foretold, the day of the worm. Honored are those blades, but in the center of the temple is the 7th altar, the spot most exalted. Upon this shrine rest the armor and weapons of the 7th son of a 7th son, a boy born under an eclipse of 3 moons and conceived from the joining of a mortal and a god. His bloodline is destined to ignite the realms within shadow and despair and shine hope upon an oppressed and dying people. In my dreams, the weapons I wield are made from mystical steel of silver and blue. My armor is impenetrable and durable, yet impossibly light. My gauntlet extends past my elbow and serves as my shield. Upon the broad cuff of the metal-plated glove is housed a diamond-shaped disc with 3 blades that emerge from its tip with a lethal snap. When flung at my enemies, the disc obeys my will. It lays waste to all my foes, then faithfully returns in my hand without fail, every time. Forged was my sword from the last remnants of creation. Its steel was tempered under the solar storms of a distant star and cooled with the very essence of life. It is the mortal enemy of rot and decay. Never will my sword be broken. Nothing can shatter its blade. It is impervious to impact. Never will its edge become worn and dull. The jeweled eye that sits within its hilt is my symbol and banner. It is the beacon that shines a light of hope and victory against any abomination that dares stand against me. In my dreams, I see a day in which black rain falls from the sky. Ropey and fibrous strands of greenish-black tar pour from the clouds. Its touch brings death and decay across the land. The arrival of the worm is heralded by a clap of thunder as his fortress bursts through the clouds. It pierces the ground like a dagger stabbed into flesh. It is a jagged and pointed crystalline citadel with bulbous blister-like domes upon its walls. The crystalline mountain is a throne from where the worm will conquer and reign. Black waterfalls pour from the dark fortress and crash to the ground, spreading outward from the mountain's base. It is the source of the decay, a black mold of writhing masses of tentacles and tendrils that infest the land with the disease of corrosion. Everything it comes into contact with begins to corrode and rot away, except for one thing: the dead. For what is a warlord without an army of pawns? The dead are absorbed and transformed into vessels for the decay to use and take form. They are the loyal eyes, the foot, and the iron fist of the worm. The once good people are now primal and vicious creatures robbed of the peace one would find in death. They are the servants of the worm. They attack with such rage and violence. Even the mightiest of soldiers cower upon their approach. They strike with fingers as sharp as daggers, and they stab with limbs as deadly as spears. The worm leaves a wake of desolation and decay in its path. It fills its ranks with the deceased and slain flesh of the villages it encounters. From his fortress, the blisters upon its walls are released, and its army of decayed and mindless drones carry the smelly, rotten masses into the heart of all 6 nations. It will plant itself into the ground and become extensions of the mind and will of the worm. From there, it will wage war against every man, woman, and child. It will lay siege against the people with the battle cry of a death rattle, screamed from the lips and mouths of their deceased friends, family, and loved ones. In my dreams, I see the goddess blessing the 6 warriors from each nation before spiriting away the 7th set of weapons. She takes them from the walls of the vulnerable temple and hides them in a place far from the worm's reach. There they will wait for the child foretold to come. In a final act of sacrifice, I see the goddess exhausting the last of her immortality to open a door of light. She places a tiny infant at the entrance, and before closing the door, she says with tears in her eyes, "Goodbye, my dearest little one. Goodbye, my beloved son." It is 20 minutes to midnight, the day of my 15th birthday. I sit on a cold wooden floor, and I am trembling next to a heated stove. But it is not the cold I tremble from. It is a deep fear that fills my heart, the deepest I've ever known. However, make no mistake, I do not fear what's to come. I want that life so much. I'm not afraid of my destiny or the future thrust upon me. I do not fear the day when I march against an army of 1,000 rotting corpses. I am not afraid of the many battles I will fight. I do not cower from the thought of the many monsters I will face and the many friends I will lose. Still, I am not afraid. No, none of that scares me. Do you want to know what scares me? Do you want me to tell you what fills me with such terror and dread? It is this. I am so afraid when tomorrow finally comes, it will come and go like any other ordinary day.
My favorite smell is blood by Hack Shuck. I started my first teaching job at a small town elementary school 3 weeks ago, and I'm still learning about my students, and learning the ropes too. I really landed on my feet with a class of 6-year-olds, too young to give me much sass. I was teaching them all about the 5 senses, and went around the room randomly asking kids to stand up and tell the class about their favorite taste, touch, smell, sound, or sight. One very quiet boy named Daniel informed us all that, "My favorite smell is blood." This elicited giggles and whispers from his classmates, so I hushed them and asked Daniel to elaborate. "Because it reminds me of my daddy," he said. More giggling and a cat call or two. I had already noticed the other kids could be quite mean towards Daniel, so I scolded them and asked him if he wouldn't mind sharing something else, hoping it would be less strange. It wasn't. "My favorite sight is blood. That reminds me of my daddy too," Daniel said, with a shy, sweet smile. I wonder if he was fully aware of what he was saying. Then, without prompting, he said, "My favorite taste is blood, and my favorite touch is blood, and my favorite sound is blood. These are what I think about when I think about my daddy." "Ew," said a girl next to him, summing up the sentiments of the rest of the room. So I asked Daniel to sit down and let someone else have a turn. But Daniel's words had troubled me. It preyed on my mind all day. And when he was leaving, I asked him why blood reminded him of his father. Daniel shrugged. "One day my mommy took me along to see what daddy does." "And what does your dad do?" I asked him. I was vaguely aware of gossip about Daniel's family having troubles in the past, and that he'd been adopted a couple of years back, but I was new to the area and didn't know any details. Daniel just shrugged again and left. Later in the teacher's lounge, I asked a colleague who lived in the area all of his life if he could shed any light on the subject. "Daniel's father was a butcher," my colleague told me. "He ran an old-fashioned store on Main Street. I used to buy some steaks from there. Most people did. They were excellent. Nice guy." I exhaled sweet relief. "That must explain why Daniel remembers blood," I said. "It must have gotten everywhere. He said his mom took him along to see what daddy does." But my colleague looked pain. "She sure did. Daniel's father was having an affair for years. His mom finally snapped and followed her husband to the mistress's home, crept into the bedroom, and sliced him into small pieces with his own meat cleaver. She held Daniel's hand the whole time."
The ghost in my attic. There's a ghost in the attic. I know that sounds strange, but really there is. That's what Debbie told Mom every night as we were tucked into bed. She was 10 at the time. I was 14. I always told her that ghosts didn't exist, but she never stopped believing. Eventually, after a year living in that house and her claiming there was a ghost there, Ma and Pa got annoyed by it. She was too young to have such beliefs, but she refused to give up on Charlie the ghost. When she was almost 12, I couldn't stand sharing a room with her babbling all night in her sleep, and talking to Charlie all morning while awake. I took her to the library hoping to find proof that nobody died there. The newspaper clippings had a different idea, though. Charlie, or Charles Hanson, disappeared from that house long before my sister and I had been born. He was 12. They solved his case only a couple years before we had moved in. I wish I'd never read how he had died, about how he had been shoved into a wooden box and sealed behind a brick wall in the attic. He had been nailed there by the shirt, and the lid of the box was chained, locked, and nailed closed. My sister took that as proof of her ghost's existence. But I just wanted to ask Ma and Pa why we would move into a house like this, and whether or not they knew what happened to that kid. You know what they told me? The price was dropped because that kid died here. I was appalled. Then, in the middle of the night, my sister disappeared from her bed. She was gone, missing. None of us had woken up until late into the morning. The authorities never found her, and my parents refused to leave the house. They loved it here, and they didn't want to move her stuff around. I moved out when I was 17, refusing to stay in the house that my sister... Well, never mind. To this day, I wear a golden charm bracelet that my sister had worn the other half of. I gave it to her on her 12th birthday. It wasn't until I was almost 20 that I returned. My parents wanted to move out now, and I was glad to help them. I couldn't stand what happened to my sister there. But I was going to get the house. I was already making plans on selling it. It was late that night when my parents had left the house for different reasons. Pa went to the bar to hang out with his buddies, acting like the child he mentally was. Ma went to play bingo, and most likely gossip with her friends. It was just me at home. I tried to relax and watch TV, but the house made me too uneasy. It would make you kind of paranoid too, so shut your trap. I was so close to falling asleep when the light ping of a hammer against nails caused my eyes to fly open. I recognized the noise. I'd heard it in my dreams the night my sister disappeared, and it's reoccurred in my nightmares ever since. I flung off the couch and down the hall to the attic entrance. I pulled the rope and climbed the ladder that slid down. "Who's there?" I hollered over and over, but nobody replied. It was the first time I'd ever been in the attic, and it'll be the last. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary except for the left wall, which was brick instead of wood, like the others. The bricks seemed old, except for a small area that seemed to have been replaced by newer bricks. I could have just left it there. The bricks could have been replaced by Ma and Pa, but then I remembered that newspaper clipping from all those years ago. I quickly searched the boxes, looking for something to smash the wall in. I settled for a hammer. I bashed it against the wall over and over again until a pungent smell wafted out. I gagged and staggered away, my eyes tearing and my nose burning, but I soon returned to the wall. I dug at the bricks with my hands until a simple wooden chest was visible. It was chained and locked, and the floor underneath it was blood-stained in a pool. A key sat beside it. I quickly unlocked the chain, tears continuing to fall as I opened the lid. But this time it wasn't because of the smell of rot. It was because of the small body inside, the blood-stained pajamas, the hair that had fallen out in chunks, and the golden charm clenched tight in my baby sister's hand.
Today is March 8th, 2018. 6 months ago, my mother died, leaving me her journal. We were close, so I took her death hard, finally transferring from one store in the retail chain I worked for to another, closer to my boyfriend, but it moved me out of state. I found a boarding house to stay in, and finally felt as though I could be okay again. Then, as things often do, everything went wrong. After the transfer, I began an overnight shift, which worked as my partner worked there overnight as well. After settling into a routine, I began to personalize my room. During this time, everything was normal, save from the grief I felt for the loss of my mother, but I had her journal. It dated back to my childhood, and it helped me feel close to her, reading of my birth and various escapades I had been on. Though at points her writing shifted, as though penned by another hand. I'll transcribe pieces of them below. April 13th, 1990. My mother died today, and I miss her so much I can hardly stand it. But I found out that I'm indeed pregnant. Though the news is bittersweet, I'm sure that with Devin, my dad's love and support, I'll be okay. November 13th, 1990. The nursery's finally ready, yet I feel as though I'm being watched. It's so strange, but I guess pregnancy does the weirdest. I didn't notice it. Things to a person, and the dreams are just so vivid. December 15th, 2000. Though I still feel uneasy, the medication the doctor gave me for the hallucination seems to be helping, and I feel content watching my little girl grow up. She's growing up so fast, I can hardly believe it. Today at school, she took lead in the play and she rocked it. The entries continue along those lines until near the end of the journal. October 26, 2017. It draws closer as I grow weaker and able to force it back, causing me to look, though I do not want to see. October 31st, 2017. It whispers to me of my mother, claiming it has her in its gravelly voice and promising me the same fate. September 1st, 2017. It's always been here. It always will be, following the line of the family. I must hold it back for as long as I can for fear of my child's sake. September 7th, 2017. I grow too weak to fight it, staring with its empty eyes, breath as close as it has ever been. I can't hold it back any longer. I wrote it off as her forgetting her medication until last night when I had a dream. In it, I was at work with my partner, but I was off, I think, because I was standing in the front vestibule of the retail chain. There was no one else around, though it's a 24-hour chain, and I knew instinctively it wasn't much past midnight. All of the shopping carts that are lined up were gone, leaving a decent-sized area empty. But the entire ambiance in the dream was skewed. Tension seemed to creep from the walls, leaving the air heavy as though a thick blanket were wrapped around me, with a humidity that drew breath away. Suddenly, from seemingly nowhere, a voice echoed loudly, stating in a deep, caustic voice,
"You still haven't noticed yet, have you?"
My partner seemed unfazed by all of this, as I turned to see a figure standing where the shopping carts go. It was difficult, under the layers of tattered clothing, to discern if it was male or female. Yet, despite the rather benign presence it presented of one of the myriad of homeless people around the area, I remember feeling a chill run up my spine. "I didn't notice," I murmured, my voice sounding small as it echoed through the air, which turned rancid. "Notice what?" my partner replied as I looked to him for a moment, saying, "The person." I glanced back to where the figure stood, only to find it had changed. The atmosphere drew cold as I stared at the creature before me, causing me instinctively to grab my partner and hide my face. Somewhat beyond description, it looked as though it was, at one time, human. Though its skin had morphed into itself, smoothing over like clay. A few strands of chalky yellow hair hung from its scalp, yet it bore no distinguishing features. Even its eyes, nose, and mouth had morphed into one androgynous blob. Before my eyes closed, it shambled forward, moving like a marionette in a stop-motion film, blinking and lunging faster than my eyes could track. I chanted repeatedly, "I didn't notice it. I didn't notice it. I didn't notice it." In a trance, helpless to do anything else. But I could feel it, right behind me, just over my right shoulder, leaning in, watching, waiting. The air was foul as it stood so near, fetid and rotting. Then I woke up. Luckily, it was the weekend, so my partner was still home. Unfortunately, all night I've had this feeling that I'm not really awake, as if I'll turn and find myself face to face with the creature from my nightmare, yet I cannot bring myself to reality fully. I once looked up to the air vent in the ceiling, only to see its face, if one could call it that, fade back into the darkness.
There is a legend circulating around the television industry. It is about Channel Infinity. Channel Infinity is hard to get to, and reports vary as to what it actually is. I will tell you how to get there and then what to do. Acquire a television, preferably with analog for the best experience, and the older the better. Acquire a remote control. It does not have to go with the television you're using. Turn on the TV and set it to a channel that is static, or just a plain black screen if you're using a digital TV. Basically, any channel you do not receive. Leave the room for about 3 hours. If you have a significant other in the house, have them with you. It is also best to call over a few friends. During those 3 hours, you should acquire a few items. I will list them in order, from the most important to the least. Note, none of these items are mandatory, but they help. You will want an item that you hold dear, 2 handheld mirrors, a firearm or other weapon, a favorite book, a mobile communications device, a key, a sledgehammer or pickaxe. After roughly 3 hours have passed, re-enter the room. Have everyone else wait outside the door. Close the door. Stare at the static or blank screen, or whatever you set the TV to, until you feel disoriented or freaked out. Call the others into the room. Give the item that you hold dear to the person that you care about the most in the room. Then send them back out. If you did not grab an item that you hold dear, hug that person and whisper a secret in their ear. Send them back out and command them not to come back into the room, no matter what, until you open the door again. Note, this will be harder for them if there are more of them, but it will be safer for you if there are more people. Trust me. Hold the mirrors so that one is reflecting the television screen into the other, and the second is reflecting you, so it looks as if the television is behind you. Stay like this until a question appears on the screen. If you did not grab the mirrors, then sit in a chair facing away from the TV until you hear a noise. Grab the remote. There will be a question on the screen. Press channel up to answer yes, channel down to answer no. There will be anywhere from 3 to 26 questions if reports are to be trusted. The questions will be anywhere from trivial to deep philosophic personal questions. Answer truthfully, or you will not succeed in reaching channel infinity. After the questions, one of 3 things will happen. 1. Your favorite show of all time will come on, but in the episode, all of the characters will be heart-wrenchingly killed. 2. You will see a picture of your least favorite person or thing ever. This is where you use the firearm or other weapon. Break the TV screen with that weapon. It will then fix itself. Note, this is obviously the easiest of the 3 things. 3. A strange, shimmery vortex will surround you, and you will be pulled into an alternate dimension. If you find yourself here, here's what to do. You will find yourself in a twisted replica of your house. You will need to go to your room, where you will find the 4 items listed that you will need for this part. Take them. Exit your house. Outside will be a more evil-looking version of our world, with red skies, a gray sun, dark orange plants, and an ever-present, thin vermilion mist. You must go to the nearest public building, for example, a school, a mall, a gas station. Use the key on the door and enter. The key will fit the lock. If you did not get a key, climb in through a window. Upon entering, find a room with only one entrance. Sit down and begin reading the book. If you did not get a book, just sit down and be bored or scared. You will hear footsteps outside of the door sometime within the next hour. Don't look up from the book. After you can no longer hear the footsteps, count to 250 out loud. Every 10 numbers, you will hear another footstep closer and closer to the door. Upon reaching 250, you will hear a knock on the door. If there are 3 knocks, open the door. If there are 4, say "I forbid you" twice, and then open the door. You will see a statue of someone you love deeply outside of the door. It could be a family member, a best friend, romantic partner, or even a fictional character. Smash its head to bits with the sledgehammer or pickaxe. If it is a female, also destroy the left hand. If you did not get the pickaxe or hammer, push the statue over. Exit the building from the entrance you came in through. It will be night. Look at the moon. It will either be pink or green, and either full or half. If it is pink and half, pull out the phone and call your third most recent contact. Pink and full. Pull out the phone and dial a random number. Before they pick up, bite through your tongue. If you did not get the device, pretend to do the things above. Green and half. Strip off all of your clothing and sprint back to your house. Don't look behind you, no matter what. Green and full. To put it bluntly, you're screwed. You'll be dead within half an hour. If it is one of the first three, you will wake up in front of the television and you can continue the ritual. After this, you will have reached Channel Infinity. What you do now is up to you. If you go to the guide function, you will see shows listed such as The Meaning of Life or How to Acquire True Love. Choose one. Note, the more people you will have outside the door with you determines the revelations that are on the shows. The more the people, the better chance you have of seeing shows with more life-changing results. Or, if you keep watching the static without going to guide or breaking eye contact with the television, you will see a series of images that will, if deciphered, reveal the answer to your greatest question. There are, at this point, many options, too many to write here. Just do what you feel like you must, and something will happen. The overwhelming majority of things will be good, but some will be bad. You may leave the room at any point. However, there are two catches. You may never speak of what you've learned after accessing Channel Infinity, and you may only reach Channel Infinity 4 times in your life. I do hope you find the experience enlightening.